Ion Iliescu, the former president of Romania, died on August 5, 2025 at age 95, many years after presiding over a transition that cost Romanians tens of billions in lost income. He ruled for 15 years, though officially only 11 as president. Today we're calculating the real price Romania paid for his version of democracy. The numbers tell a brutal story. While Poland's economy grew by roughly a third by 1996 on a per capita basis, Romania's output fell steeply in 1990 to 1992 and only partially recovered by the mid-1990s. The gap between what Romanians earned and what they could have earned reaches 96 billion international dollars by 2004, but the cost goes deeper than money. The Mineriads, those violent episodes where miners attacked protesters, left at least 8 dead and hundreds injured. Triple-digit inflation destroyed savings. This isn't just history, it's a bill that Romanians are still paying. The morning of December 22, 1989 changed everything. Nicolae Ceausescu fled Bucharest by helicopter as revolutionaries stormed the Central Committee building. Within hours, Ion Iliescu appeared on television as the face of the National Salvation Front. A former Communist Party official who'd fallen out with Ceausescu, he promised democracy and free markets. Romanians watching their grainy televisions that day couldn't know they were seeing the man who would dominate their politics for the next 15 years. His actual grip on power lasted longer than the headline suggests. First, he led the provisional government from December 1989 to May 1990. Then 3 presidential terms, 1990 to 1992, 1992 to 1996, and 2000 to 2004. Between these periods, his political machine never stopped running. The National Salvation Front transformed into the Democratic National Salvation Front, then into the Party of Social Democracy, which merged with smaller parties to create today's Social Democratic Party. This wasn't just political musical chairs, it was the construction of Romania's most powerful political organization. The 1990 election reveals everything about how Iliescu operated. He won 85% of the presidential vote, whilst his National Salvation Front took 2/3 of parliament. These weren't Stalin-style fake numbers. International observers confirmed the votes were real, but the playing field was completely tilted. Iliescu controlled state television, the only source of information for most Romanians. Opposition parties had weeks to organize, whilst he had the entire state apparatus. Imagine trying to win a football match when the other team owns the stadium, employs the referees, and you just learned the rules yesterday. The comparison between Romania and Poland's economic paths reads like a tragedy in numbers. Both countries started their transitions in 1989 and 1990. Both faced similar challenges: obsolete industries, bloated state sectors, worthless currencies. But their leaders made very different choices. Poland went for what economists call shock therapy. Prices were freed overnight. State companies were forced to compete or die. The zloty was made convertible. It hurt badly at first. Unemployment shot up and living standards dropped. But by 1992, Poland was growing. By 1996, its economy was a third larger than in 1990. Romania under Iliescu chose gradualism. The government kept subsidizing loss-making factories. Price controls remained on basic goods. The leu stayed unconvertible for years. Iliescu argued this protected workers and prevented social chaos. State subsidies in 1992 reached a double-digit share of GDP. That's like the British government spending hundreds of billions just to keep zombie companies alive. Consider Hunedoara, a steel town in Transylvania. The communist-era steel plant employed around 20,000 people in 1993. Under Iliescu's gradualism, the government kept it running with subsidies. Workers kept their jobs, but their wages bought less each year as inflation exploded. The plant faced shutdowns in 1999 and final privatization in 2003 to 2004, by which time the town's young people had already left. Hunedoara's population fell by roughly 40% between 2002 and 2011 and remains far below 1990 levels. Those subsidies didn't save the town, they just prolonged its death. The mathematics of failure are staggering. From 1991 to 1994, Romania's economy produced $2,115 international dollars less per person than if it had just maintained its 1990 level. Multiply that by 22.7 million Romanians and you get 48 billion international dollars in lost income. That's not comparing to some impossible ideal, that's comparing to Romania just treading water. The real comparison that stings comes from looking west. If Romania had matched Poland's growth rate from 1990 to 1996, each Romanian would have earned 1,346 international dollars more in 1996 alone. Scale that up, 30 billion international dollars in additional income that year. By 2004, Iliescu's last year in office, the gap had widened to $4,424 international dollars per person. That's 96 billion international dollars in PPP terms, about half of Romania's 2004 GDP in PPP terms. Why did Poland succeed whilst Romania stagnated? The answer lies in privatization. Poland's mass privatization program created real owners quickly. Romania's Law 58 from 1991 gave citizens vouchers for 30% of state companies while keeping 70% in government hands. 5 private ownership funds held these shares, but citizens couldn't actually control anything. For 5 critical years, 1992 to 1996, thousands of enterprises operated with no real owners, hemorrhaging value whilst competitors in Poland modernized. These inflation rates should have triggered revolution. In 1991, 231%. In 1992, 211%. In 1993, 255%. In 1994, 137%. A Romanian teacher in 1993 who'd saved 3 months' salary, maybe $1,200 international dollars, watched 2/3 evaporate by year's end. Their savings bought what $340 international dollars bought before. Not stolen by thieves, but by government policy. This wasn't unavoidable. Poland brought inflation under control within 2 years. Czech inflation peaked below 60% in 1991. Iliescu's government printed money to fund subsidies and delay reforms. They knew what would happen. Every economics textbook warns about printing money. Well, they did it anyway. The human cost transcended numbers. Pensioners who worked 40 years saw their savings evaporate. Young couples couldn't plan futures when prices changed daily. The middle class, what little existed under communism, got wiped out. Trust in institutions collapsed. Why save money when the government will destroy its value? Why follow rules when the rules keep changing? The psychological damage lasted longer after inflation finally dropped. The image that defines Iliescu's early rule comes from University Square in Bucharest, June 13, 1990. Students and intellectuals had camped there for weeks, demanding former communists be barred from government. The protests were peaceful, even festive. Then came the miners. The sequence unfolds like a nightmare. Police tried clearing the square on June 13. When protesters resisted, Iliescu appeared on television calling for help from conscious forces to defend democracy. Within hours, thousands of miners arrived from the U Valley, 300 kilometers away. They came in special trains, organized and equipped with clubs and chains. For 3 days, miners rampaged through Bucharest. They didn't just attack protesters, they invaded opposition party headquarters, destroyed printing presses, and beat journalists. At least several died and over 1,000 were injured, with investigations later condemned by the European Court of Human Rights. University students were dragged from dormitories and beaten. One architect student lost an eye. A philosophy professor had his ribs broken. The international reaction was devastating. The European community delayed its planned trade pact with Romania, and Western governments condemned the violence. Western investors fled. But more importantly, it sent a message to all Romanians: oppose the government and face violence. Democracy meant whatever Iliescu said it meant. September 1991 brought the second Mineriad. This time, the miners came to overthrow Prime Minister Petru Roman, Iliescu's former ally turned rival. 3 to 4 died, hundreds were injured. The government fell. The message was clear: political disputes would be settled by force, not votes. The pattern continued through the decade. In 1999, another Mineriad left one confirmed dead at Stoinești, with over 500 arrests. The European Court of Human Rights later ruled that Romania failed to properly investigate these deaths. Files disappeared, witnesses forgot, videotapes got lost. The culture of impunity that started in 1990 poisoned Romanian democracy for decades. King Michael I embodied everything Iliescu's regime feared: continuity with pre-communist Romania, international respectability, an alternate source of legitimacy. The former king had been forced to abdicate by communists in 1947. He spent decades in exile, mostly in Switzerland, maintaining dignity whilst communists destroyed his country. Christmas 1990 should have been triumphant. Ceausescu was dead. Communism had fallen. King Michael attempted to return for Orthodox Christmas. The government refused him entry at the airport. The legitimate former head of state, now an old man wanting to pray in his homeland, turned away like a criminal. The message was unmistakable. There would be no restoration, no return to pre-communist legitimacy. Easter 1992 brought a different approach. The government allowed a brief visit. 500,000 people gathered in Bucharest alone. In every city the king visited, massive crowds appeared, not organized by parties or paid by unions, just Romanians wanting to see their former king. The government panicked. Future visits were banned. When he finally regained citizenship in 1997, under Emil Constantiniescu's government, it was too late for the monarchy but not too late for reconciliation. The monarchy represented more than just nostalgia. It meant rule of law, property rights, international connections. The royal family's properties, seized by communists, became a test case for restitution. If the king couldn't get his property back, what chance did ordinary Romanians have? The answer? Very little. Property restitution under Iliescu moved at glacial pace, protecting those who'd benefited from communist theft. April 1991 revealed Iliescu's true foreign policy instincts. Whilst other Eastern Europeans rushed towards the West, he signed a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union. Yes, the same Soviet Union that had occupied Romania, imposed communism, and extracted billions in war reparations. The treaty happened just months before the USSR collapsed, showing either spectacular bad timing or deliberate preference for Moscow. But pragmatism eventually won. Romania joined NATO's Partnership for Peace in January 1994, actually the first country to sign the framework document. The path wasn't smooth. Western reporting at the time noted slow reform and continuity in the security services, complicating integration. Military officers trained in Moscow dominated the general staff. Reform moved slowly, like turning an oil tanker with a paddle. The real breakthrough came during Iliescu's third term. In November 2002, NATO invited Romania to join. On March 29, 2004, Romania became a full member. The ceremony in Washington was triumphant. Iliescu stood with President Bush as the NATO flag rose. The man who'd signed treaties with the Soviets now brought Russia into the Western Alliance. The European Union path proved even longer. Romania signed its Europe Agreement in 1993, but implementation dragged. Corruption, weak institutions, and slow reforms delayed progress. The European Commission's reports read like a catalogue of failures: justice system unreformed, corruption endemic, administration incompetent. Each report recommended patience. Diplomatic language for Romania isn't ready. EU ascension would finally happen in 2007, 3 years after Iliescu left office. The people born around 1970 made millions of Romanian stories. Under communism, their parents worked in factories. They had an apartment, a car every 10 years, annual Black Sea holidays. Not rich, but secure. Then came 1990. Their father's factory closed in 1992. Their mother's job disappeared in 1994. Their savings evaporated with inflation. By 1995, their fathers were working in Italy, sending money home. Their mothers sold vegetables in the market, and they left for Spain or further in Western Europe starting in 2002. By 2007, around 3.4 million Romanians were working abroad. By 2010, about 3.3 million were counted by the UN as emigrants. Today, around 4 million live outside of Romania. This story repeated across Romania. The working class that communism claimed to champion got destroyed by the transition. Skilled workers became security guards, engineers drove taxis, teachers sold insurance. The secure if limited communist life vanished, replaced by capitalism's uncertainties without capitalism's opportunities. The statistics are damning. Industrial employment roughly halved from around 3.9 million in 1990 to about 1.9 million in 2000. Those jobs didn't transform into better ones, they just disappeared. Service sector growth meant supermarkets and call centers, not high tech or finance. The few winners were those positioned to grab state assets. Former party officials, security service officers, anyone with connections and flexible morals. Poland's experience shows another path existed. There, new private companies employed millions by 1995. Small businesses flourished immediately. In Romania, bureaucracy strangled entrepreneurship. Getting a business permit took months. Taxes changed constantly. Inspectors demanded bribes. Why start a company when keeping it legal was nearly impossible? Social stress indicators worsened throughout the 1990s. From higher alcohol-related morality and family strain to plunging birth rates, as people coped with job losses and inflation. Birth rates collapsed from 2.2 children per woman in 1989 to 1.3 by 2000. Villages emptied as young people left for cities or abroad. Extended families that survived communism shattered under transition stress. The social fabric didn't fray, it tore apart. Imagine a balance sheet for a country instead of a company. On one side, assets gained. NATO membership, EU preparation, some democratic institutions. On the other hand, liabilities. $48 billion international dollars lost to recession, $96 billion international dollars gap with Poland by 2004, destroyed savings, shattered trust, millions of emigrants, and democracy stained by violence. The Mineriads alone, beyond their immediate victims, cost Romania its reputation for a generation. Every foreign investor remembered those images of miners beating students. Every European diplomat wondered if Romania had really changed. The violence didn't just kill and injure hundreds, it killed Romania's chances for rapid integration and investment. But the deepest cost was opportunity. Romania in 1990 had advantages: educated population, natural resources, strategic location. It could have been Europe's success story. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. Whilst Estonia built a digital government, Romania couldn't digitize basic records. Whilst Slovenia approached Western living standards, Romania remained among the poorest EU members in the 2000s. The calculation isn't just about money. Though 96 billion in PPP terms is staggering, it's about lives unlived. The teacher who became a cleaner in Rome, the engineer who drives lorries in Germany, the doctor who gave up medicine to sell mobile phones. Each represents potential wasted, dreams deferred, a country bleeding talent because its leaders chose slow decline over painful reform. Ion Iliescu died at 95, but his legacy remains turbulent. The numbers don't lie. Tens of billions lost in PPP terms, millions fled, democracy scarred. Romania's transition could have been faster, less painful, more successful. Other countries proved it. The real cost of Iliescu's 15 years wasn't just economic, it was a generation's lost potential. That's a debt Romania is still paying, while darker shadows loom over the country.